All right, folks, welcome back to the Serious Angler podcast. And on this week's edition of the Real Biology, as always, joined by Mr. Stephen Bardin, we have another heater for the folks, and it kind of just seems like that's every episode. But we got Mr. Jake Norman back on the show, Steve.
Yeah, Jake from Texas Parks and Wildlife, the black bass coordinator. I think he actually says in the episode that officially it's called the largemouth bass coordinator now, and also district supervisor for the Tyler district, which includes Lake Fork. Lake
Yeah.
Fork, it's world famous Lake Fork. But this is back to what we like to put this show together. Great biologists doing great work, talking us through it, the thought process. The Q&A special was fun. I always enjoy doing Q&A. But this is what I wanted the show to be about whenever you and I decided we would do a podcast. I want it to be about highlighting the professionals that have a huge passion, take this seriously, make the best fisheries in the world. And Jake delivered, as we expected him to do for this episode. And I look forward to the audience, learning a little bit more of the in-depths of what does it take to take a decade of a fishery, and what does it take to actually produce double-digit or trophy class fish during a decade long, instead of thinking about a fishery as how did I do last Saturday.
Yeah. It's kind of cool how it goes into why Lake Fork is Lake Fork.
Exactly.
And how they're using that formula in other fisheries. And I guess that poses the question, and I'll ask it to you now before we get into this with Jake, is why aren't more states, more fisheries adopting a slot limit? Because it seems to work so well for building just these giant fish.
Yeah, we're going to get into slot limits and why they work, how they work, and do they work. So I don't want to spoil that. But what I will say about why do we not see more of them is because, as a general rule, you need anglers to understand what the regulation is. It is so much easier if there's a statewide reg to where every angler, no matter skill level, how long they've been an angler, if this is their first license or their 50th license, they know how to participate. Whenever we have slot limits or unique limits for the reservoir, a specific reservoir, that complicates it, because that means, number one, the angler has to know what the regulation is, and number two, somebody has to enforce it. So then we have our enforcement agencies that also have to be on that reservoir, understand our ignorance is never an excuse, but understand whenever they make a stop, like, is this intentional or non-intentional? And there's some gray area about what do they need to do about that. And it's complicated, Bailey. It's complicated where, yes, every reservoir should have its unique regulation to make it a better fishery. But no, we don't do that because it's hard to, number one, get the public to understand what the regulations are, and number two, enforce them if they're all unique.
I like it. Well, there's a lot of good stuff that's coming up in this one for the folks, but I think, Steve, without further ado, let's crack into this thing.
Yes, let's do it. Wait, no, let's not. Let's really quickly.
Okay.
Didn't you have a kayak tournament this last weekend?
I did. I had a couple.
How'd we do?
I had one a couple days ago. I got 5th out of 52 folks. It was not my best showing of execution anyway, but dumped a few, broke off a few. Learned that I thought it was potentially a rod problem. Like one of the guides had an issue, but I'm learning that the sinking braid I was using became brittle. And so I'm learning I have to keep fresh on that because it was breaking like 10, 20 feet up the line.
Yep.
Even on like 2-pound fish. And I'm okay. I'm content with losing fish, but I absolutely hate breaking off fish because I feel like a jerk.
Right.
Especially when you leave that much line on it too, where it's one thing, I guess, to break off at the bait, hopefully they can shake it. But when they got 20 feet of line hanging off of them too, I feel even worse. But it was one of those deals, bad execution, but happy to walk away with 5th anyway.
Yeah. Well, we're always happy to hear how you did. We're living our kayak dreams through you, Bailey.
Kayak dreams. I don't know if anybody has too many kayak dreams these days, but it definitely is fun. I enjoy the heck out of it.
Yeah. At this point, as we're going to start this episode, it's hot in Texas. Too hot to really be in a kayak, in my opinion.
Yeah, but there's crazy people like me that'll do
That's
it.
exactly right. That's why you're living our kayak dreams. Okay, now on to Jake.
All right, folks, we're back, of course, with another Real Biology. I'm joined here with Mr. Stephen Bardin, and folks that have been was a favorite on the Serious Angler podcast of all time, Mr. Jake Norman out of Texas. Fellas, how we doing?
Doing great, Bailey. Jake, how are you?
Likewise, doing great. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Yeah, it sounds like a heat wave ripper through. We talked about that briefly offline. I'd say 90 is bad here in New York, but I can't imagine what it's like in Texas right now.
Yeah, we're hitting 90s now, and I think it's ready to start pushing more. The humidity is ramping up. Like I said, we went from flooding. We're still flooding in places, but now we're flooding and it's scorching hot.
Yeah, Jake's on the other side of the state from me. It's 200 miles difference between the two of us, and he's on the humid side of the state. I'm on the dry side of the state. So for us, mid 90s, but no humidity at all. So it's actually maybe a cooler 90. I always like the heat because it's a dry heat here, and you can get out and work, and there's only like 2 hours out of the day when it's too hot to be outside.
Yeah, I know our heat indexes are hitting. I've seen 102 to 104 already several days.
Oh, I go east, and it's like bring an extra pair of clothes because by 10 o'clock you got to change.
Oh, it's awful. I was in insulated waders last week in the middle of it.
What were you doing in waders, Jake?
That's backpack shocking. Some of that work you're doing on fork. So
Okay, so for the audience who didn't watch the Serious Angler episodes with Jake in the past, Jake Norman is district biologist. He's got more reservoirs than anybody else in the state when it comes to black bass fisheries or just total number of reservoirs. You got more bodies of water, but the shining star of the district is of course Lake Fork.
absolutely, yeah, a lot of good water,
And
but fork's my baby.
well, Fork is nationally, if not internationally, known. Right? It is the trophy bass fishery. In the last couple of years, OHIV here in Texas has tried to take a swing at that crown, but I think that Fork is on a comeback, and it would be cool to start this episode. I think walking through like what has happened over the last decade at Lake Fork, and why are we not seeing those 13 plus pound fish coming out and it really producing the share lunkers that it did historically.
Yeah, it's really, truthfully, I always say it's so simple when you look at it. If habitat is everything on Fork. Shallow water habitat, it's lifeline, the golden ticket. It drives those stable populations, and everything else in Fork is there to grow the big fish. We just need good year classes. So you look at it over the last 10 years, even a little bit longer than that. Fork went through, and all of East Texas went through a really bad drought, say 2010 through 2013. You could extend that a little on both ends, but low water for Fork is 7 feet. Historical lows are just around 8 feet. But when that happens, you lose thousands of acres. I mean, there's lots of really popular productive areas could be dry for hundreds of yards. And we have that for prolonged periods. You just get nothing. You end up with bare banks. When that happens, of course, we don't have good spawns around here at all. So that first drought, you know, early 2010s, 2013, we had some terrible year classes for year after year after year. And you don't feel that right away. I mean, you get that, but you don't see it right away because you've got adult fish in the population already. Those fish that just spawned, you're going to see 2 to 10 years down the road, depending on what size class of fish you're talking about. So luckily, the lake got a big bump in 2014, 2015. It recovered, filled back up, went through a new lake cycle then. All the terrestrial cover, trees, bushes that grew up during the drought are all flooded. There's cover everywhere, so you get some great spawns then. Really 2014 through 2016. But right about then also, of course, you're going to see those weak year classes, those fish that should now be 2 to 6 pounds, they're missing out of the population. So you see that quality of fish dip for a little bit. Like I said, thank God we had those spawns. So those good year classes from 2014, 15, 16, they're really showing up in the lake now in those quality, even trophy size fish. We're seeing a comeback from that right now. So I'd say I've seen more 8+ pound fish caught this year than in a long time. And again, let's not forget, fork in its downturn, people are still catching 8 to 10 pound fish. And even in those weaker years, it's still probably spitting out more 8-pounders than almost any lake anywhere. So I don't don't want to trash the lake too bad. It's still awesome on a bad cycle. But right now, again, those fish are growing up. A lot of 8+ pound fish. I've seen more double digit fish caught this year, I think, than I have in a long time. I had a guide send me a picture of one he caught the other day. It was 12.5 pounds, just barely pushing 25 inches in late June. So those are the type of fish we like to see in fork, and there's more and more of those showing up. And another, good thing going forward even more, we had another, this time it wasn't a drought, but the SRA had to do some substantial dam repairs back in 21 and 22. So they did a drawdown then. They dropped the lake. Again, we almost got down to historical lows for over a year as well. 7+ feet low, bare bank, but lots of good flooded habitat came back when they filled it back up in 22. So we had a great year class then. The really cool thing we've seen now is that drawdown really seemed to stimulate aquatic vegetation. And we can talk for hours on what's maybe causing that. I think just getting it exposed to the atmosphere, getting it kind of oxygenized in that substrate has really helped. But we've seen all kinds of good vegetation come back. I saw hydrilla come back in places I haven't seen in over a decade. So not only did we get that new lake effect from those last couple of years, but now we're seeing aquatic vegetation that hopefully will hold on and stay in the lake really expand this year as well. So long and short, yeah, fork's on a comeback right now. Truthfully, I don't want to sell it as the next coming of the beginning of the lake, but there's a lot of quality 8+ pound fish, and we've had great year classes the last few years. The habitat's looking great. It makes my job a lot easier, and it makes me feel really good about the lake right now.
I think I can speak for the folks that aren't in Texas. They're like, when you're saying Lake Fork's coming back, we're like, when was it not good? We're sitting here watching the events, and obviously some folks on social media, and everyone's catching big ones. We're like, it seems like Fork's always been good, but I think you guys are saying in reference to like that upper echelon of the pyramid of fish when you're saying it's coming back.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, we have a different standard here. We judge Lake Fork as the ShareLunker producing, number one reservoir in the state. So it's producing those 13-pound or greater fish at a higher rate than anywhere else. I mean, I'm not going to put Jake on the spot and ask for the exact number of ShareLunkers, but let's just say like 2 out of 3 historically have came out of Fork, and it hasn't been until more recently that Fork has had that decline. And like Jake said, this is going to be a cool part of the show, because we can take something that anglers talk about all the time, which is a lake cycling, and we can look back at Lake Fork and talk about why that cycle happened. And you just mentioned a couple of things, like in 2010 through 2013, the lake dropped 7 feet. We lose that terrestrial habitat, that littoral zone habitat. That a lot of your fish production would come out of. Your year classes go away. They've got really poor recruitment for 3, 4, 5 years in a row. Well, like you said, Jake, we don't feel that until 5 years later, when those fish should be in the adult population. They should be those 3 to 5 pound fish we're catching, and now we're not seeing them. And a lot of times anglers will take what is happening today on the fishery and say, well, I'm not catching fish today, those 3 to 5 pound class fish, because of X reason that happened within the last 60 days. And that could be vegetation, loss of vegetation, even a herbicide application, whatever it might be. And we attribute the lack of catching fish to today. But the lack of catching fish actually is a 5 year ago issue.
Absolutely. And it's, a lot of anglers on Fork love to talk about when the lake is low, it fishes at its best. A lot of anglers always say, leave it low, it fishes great. And sure, at that time they're catching adult fish, and they're concentrated more, they're easier to find. So it helps everything. But right now the lake's full again. We got everything going for us, and they don't realize those damages that are maybe happening when the lake's low. Sure, they're catching the adults, but they're gonna feel that in a few years from that lack of year classes.
Yeah, when we talk about like ShareLunkers specifically, those fish take a much longer timeline to develop. I've looked at different growth rates on individual sharelunkers that we know the day they were stocked, because Texas Parks and Wildlife has such good genetic work. They can tell if a fish caught today is the offspring of a former sharelunker, and so we have examples of when that fish was born, and now it's grown to that 13-pound size class, and we know that um, they grow on like a rate of about 1.3 to 1.5 pounds a year because they're reaching 13 pounds around 10.
Yep.
And so when we're talking about, okay, that 2014 to 2016 window, when the lake has now rebounded and is now full and experiencing that new lake effect, those fish that we would catch today at 12, 12 and a half, like you mentioned, those fish were born in that window.
Yep.
And they've hit that growth rate. And so the system is working. It's doing exactly what we expect it to do. We just needed some time. And then you had this fake drawdown by SRA, like it actually happened, but it was man drew the lake down, not drought. So it was controlled. It was a shorter duration. And those short duration drawdowns do nothing but help because they do allow the soil to reoxygenate. You're absolutely right. I love that. It also allows nutrient to be bound in a different way, and then terrestrial vegetation to regrow quickly. So those short duration drawdowns, they spur on this new lake effect. So following the big drought, you have a natural flooding event, refills the lake. We see good year classes those years. You have this short duration drawdown that now is allowing you to have terrestrial habitat be flooded. And I think there's nothing but good news, over the next 5 years for Lake Fork.
Yeah, I agree completely. Next 5 years, really, if you look at it even long term, I'd say 5 to 10 years right now, we're going to see really quality fish caught. I've been asked this question I think every year for a few. It's like, why aren't we seeing sharelunkers on Fork, Jake? What's going on? And it's pointing the finger. And it's pretty easy to look back at these cycles and the water levels and the lack of habitat and everything else. And I keep saying, I don't hold me to it. Mother Nature finds a way. I could be proven wrong, but I would be shocked if we don't see over the next several years some teeners caught and turned in again into the program.
Right. Yeah. And that's, if you're seeing a 12 and a half in June,
Yep.
Logic would say that fish was a 13-pound plus fish whenever she was egg bound. But she's not the only one.
No.
She's not the only one. But this is great because it does talk about that cycling. And during that time, you were still, like you said, you were still catching 6, 8, 10-pound fish. It's just the production of a sharelunker or a fish beyond 10 pounds. You need a decade of quality growth years.
Yep.
You have to have things right for those fish to grow. And we see the same thing at Ivy. Ivy will have these short bursts, like 4 to 5 years of greatness. And then unfortunately, it's west. We experience dramatic drought where we're not talking about 7 feet. We're talking about 30 to maybe 40 feet of water loss on a reservoir like Ivy. And when you get that, you have this protracted decade-long reversal of that fish growth, and it takes a long time to actually get back into those cycles. So we do see this. This is something that anglers talk about around the country, is the reservoir cycling. I just urge you to always think about if you're having a couple of consecutive bad years where you're not seeing fish catches like you once did, it could be something short-term like a fish kill that happened, but those are rare. It is more likely that if you look back 5 years, you can see where we missed a spawn class for a specific reason.
No, absolutely. And I say, on our East Texas lakes, truthfully, missing one year class, usually you don't feel too bad. Our growth rates are great overall, and you miss 1 year class, you really won't see it. When you kind of mentioned you get back-to-back year classes, 2 bad spawns in a row, or you're going to feel that. You are going to notice a gap in several pound classes of fish that are going to be a lot more scarce in the coming years. It's inevitable.
So let's talk about whenever we lack those spawning classes. I know we have the sharelunker stocking program. Walk me through what a Lone Star bass is, and then how you assess, do you need to restock bass? We talk about restocking bass and is it ever needed, those kind of things. You're giving me an example when restocking fish would be possibly needed. So walk us through y'all's process on that.
Sure. So first, on the stocking front, I tell our folks all over that we don't stock to replace or improve a population most of the time. Our lakes, even in habitat poor areas overall, Mother Nature, natural spawns, natural reproduction is going to maintain a level of a population that stocking isn't going to augment. It's the bass are the abundance of bass in a lake most of the time are at that abundance for a given reason that is not due to stocking or reproduction alone. It's the habitat, it's everything else in the lake that's supporting that abundance of bass. So most of the time, we're not stocking to regrow a population. Of course, you mentioned fish kills. There's a time we would. A brand new lake, we would. Extreme drought in West Texas lakes, that's completely different. That's when you actually can rebuild a population. But most of the time, we're stocking because of the genetics. We're stocking, and truthfully, we've even seen at this point, we're not trying to, before Lone Star bass at least, genetics, Florida bass in general, we don't need to spread the genetics throughout at this point because the genetics are there. We're almost have been stocking as a put, grow, and take, truthfully. We're going to stock, this fish has the genetics we know to grow to a large size and to get there quickly. If that fish survives, it's going to one day be a trophy and somebody might catch that fish. The very fundamental concept of stocking a lot of times is truthfully that we want to stock these fish, those fish survive, and somebody catches them, which is really cool. Our last share lunker at a fork, a 15 pounder that was caught in 21, I believe, it was a hatchery fish. It was a Florida largemouth bass stocked. I forget the exact date now, but it was exactly that. That fish produced in our hatchery, stocked, grew to 15 pounds, and an angler caught it. That's phenomenal. Now, the Lone Star bass, focusing specifically on those are essentially, for those that don't know, a second generation share lunker offspring. So we really did a cool overhaul of our entire broodfish system a few years ago, and essentially went from just, I call run of the mill Florida bass, but still, just standard Florida largemouth bass for our brooders and what we're producing. Say, I'm just going to say 6 to 8 million fingerlings a year. Instead of Florida largemouth bass, well, still Florida's, but we're taking share lunkers now, donated share lunkers, 13-pound plus females. They spawn, they produce fingerlings. Instead of just stocking all of those fingerlings immediately back out into the lake, we held on to some of those fingerlings and grew those out. So now, as those came into age and size, those were our brood stock. So over the course of several years, our entire brood system for our entire largemouth bass program are share lunker descendants. So those genetics are passed on. It's been proven over and over and over. Growth is heritable. Genetics is heritable. They pass those traits on to their offspring most of the time. So now our entire brood stock that's producing, let's say, again, 6 to 8 million fingerlings a year, all have those direct share lunker genetics in them. So these fish just from the get-go have the better chances of growing even larger. So really excited about that. I think, Bodark's a great example right now. Bodark Lake is almost entirely comprised of Lone Star bass, I believe. So, of course, we're seeing a new lake effect there. So growth's always going to be just insane, really impressive. But on top of that, I think those fish are performing really well because of their genetics from the get-go. So, quick overview of what Lone Star bass are. As far as stocking them, I am one that really looks at habitat. Most of the time, I am not going to stock. I'm not going to put in a request to stock a lake unless I think those fish have a good chance to survive. So if we do not have, like you said, littoral habitat, if we don't have vegetation, terrestrial cover, abundant flooded woody debris, whatever, something along the bank to give those fingerlings cover, I'm not going to stock there. There's not much of a point because their survival will be next to nothing. Though I have several lakes in my district, truthfully, that produce quality, even trophy bass year over year. Jacksonville is a great example. Cedar Creek. Unfortunately, they just don't really have the cover for me to stock them consistently, and that changes when we get droughts, drawdowns, whatever else, and you get some short-term pulses and cover, yeah, we stocked fish those years. But other than that, I look at lakes that have the cover for fish to survive, and then also, truthfully, lakes that we know have historically grown quality or trophy size bass to begin with. We don't want to stock them in. Well, I hate to say mud hole now, truthfully, because look at JB Thomas. That I used to always just say we don't stock them in a mud hole, but okay, there's some lakes when, you know, crazy scenarios where the productivity is still there, the forage is still there. It can happen, but if you have a lake that's low productivity, poor habitat, they don't have a good forage base, even if you stock those fish and they survive, they're probably not going to have the forage they need to grow quickly. They're not going to achieve what you want out of them. It would be trying to relate this to whitetail deer or to cattle even, but all the same, you've got to have, the genetics there, but you have to have all the other components as well with genetics to still reach that maximum potential. So,
Man, Jake, the point you just made there is the highlight of the show.
hey, I can just step away then, I guess. Let's do
Yes. No, this is
Bye.
something that bye, bye. Thanks for showing up. No, this is something that I don't think we can say enough times, that there's a carrying capacity, a number of bass that annually are going to be recruited into the adult population from whatever's naturally spawned or stocked. There's a number.
Yeah.
And that number goes up and down based on habitat, forage, water quality. That's going to determine what that number is. So some years it may be low, other years it may be high. But stocking fish is not going to improve the growth rate of that individual year class if those other things aren't available, the forage, the habitat, and the water quality. Because genetics can only be showcased in an environment where all other things are at optimum level.
Absolutely.
So reservoirs that naturally grow fish to a large size, if you then put the right genetics on top of that, you can expand what that larger size is. You can get to that 13-pound size class or greater. But the genetics can only be showcased by the environment that the fish actually lives in. So this is, you've hit cycles of reservoirs. You've hit how do we optimize our stocking potential. Gosh, Jake, this is why we always call you back for more shows, because you are the man.
I like to do what I can to help, and I'm just I speak the truth. How about that?
There you go. So let's go back to why you were in waders. That's where this whole conversation started 20 minutes ago. Mm-hmm. Was Jake said he was wearing waders, which put me on a tangent. Put me on a tangent. So Fork has been through this cycle. It is now full. Jake is out in waders. The lake is full right now because the SRA drew the dam down. We've had great rain. They've made their repairs. You're back at a full pool. Mm-hmm. Correct? Absolutely. All right. So now you're out in your waders. What are you doing in those waders?
Sweating. Lots of sweating. It was no, but so what we're doing right now, we've got a habitat project, we're wanting to do this fall, and that all stems as well. It's habitat driven. Most of the work I want to do is always going to be habitat driven, and so this is no exception. I'll even give a quick background of what drove this story. Electrofishing Fork last fall, we had a stretch. Ultimately, there was pretty habitat poor, but there had recently been a homeowner cut some brush down along his bank, and he had a lot of that just thrown out in the lake right there. And it was one of the best sites we had on the entire lake. Shocking. Otherwise, again, would have been just some standing timber, bare clay bank, and I can tell you it would have been pretty poor. And granted, we're shocking adult bass there, but all the same, the light bulb kind of went off. And this isn't a challenging or deep concept at all, but this guy, there's fresh cover out in this lake and fish are relating to it. And I said, well, why couldn't we try to do something like that similarly, but based again for spawning cycles and for young of the year cover? Why can't we put cover along shorelines that are currently lacking vegetation and essentially replace what should be vegetation with Christmas trees or other brush, give those fish something to spawn on, and then ultimately give those fry fingerlings, those young of the year bass, cover, increase survival? Why could we not do that? So again, Fork has such great resources around it, not in just the lake itself, but the people, the community. And I think it's going to be a really easy one to rally around to do good old fashioned Christmas tree roundup, something I have not been a fan of or a proponent of in a while. And in the traditional sense of let's get Christmas trees and go sink them out deep and make a brush pile, those don't last long enough to really give me the benefit for what you're looking at. But in this case, if we can improve habitat along the shoreline with Christmas trees enough to actually have better spawns in those areas, I see a good actual benefit in that. So, I guess fast forward, why am I in forking 600-gram thinsulate waders in June when it's 100 degrees out sweating? We're trying to collect some pre-habitat installment data now to look at what do these areas have in terms of young of the year fingerlings. How many fingerlings are we seeing in these areas right now? Simply because if there's a chance to have a good study out of this, ultimately I want what's best for the lake. Studies are a benefit of that. They don't always happen. I want to do what's good for the lake. But in this situation, if something like this works, it's worth documenting, having a publication, having a study done on it. So to do that, we wanted to have some early data. What's it look like before we made any changes? And then, of course, put out the Christmas trees in the brush this late winter, go back and do those same samplings. So I have to do it again next year, unfortunately, and see if we see a change. Did we increase, at least localize? Did we have more fingerlings? Did we have better survival in those areas, stronger year classes?
That makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, when you think about fork, there's 3 habitat types. You have, you have woody timber, standing and degrading over time. Yep. You have artificially installed rock, as in riprap, shore walls, things like that. And you have vegetation. And the downfall of vegetation is, as you've kind of explained it even today, is vegetation is seasonal. Number one, it has a growing season in the spring, has a mature season in the summer, then starts to degrade in the fall. And of course, winter, you don't have vegetation. Or it can also be in a year class, it can change based on water level and nutrient inflows and things like that. So it's unpredictable.
Yep.
And what you're trying to do, Jake, is take, I want to even call it a pond management principle. Like if I could take one tree and, dense cedar tree or whatever it is and put it in 2 foot of water, I will see juvenile sunfish. I will see juvenile bass. They will concentrate around that tree, mainly to escape predation. So I think that this is really cool. I can't wait to see how many trees you actually need to lay down, to make a difference. And I do think that the cool part of this is, like you said, it's an ongoing study. You're just collecting the preliminary data. You've got an idea. It comes from an observation during electrofishing. It's solid science. May or may not change production. You'll figure that out. Mm-hmm. But I think what also is cool about it is it goes back to the topic we just had of stocking, where if it does increase production, it could also be a place that would be very easy to future stock around. You may pick certain creeks, put the trees in, followed up with a stocking because they'll have better survival.
Absolutely.
What will be interesting is going back to our original conversation, looking at it 5 years from now, did increasing that year class at the right time, because we now have a full lake that's nutrient rich, full of forage, all the new lake effect, did increasing that year class at that time produce more trophy size class fish? And that'll be depending once again on that carrying capacity number and also the fitness or the ability to compete in the environment of the individuals that are either stocked or spawned at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I truthfully, I tell people all the time that fish management, the concepts and the principles are so simple. I mean, they really are. The basics, what has to go into it to manage a population, produce fish, grow fish, everything. It's not rocket science at all. But on big reservoirs, a lot of times it's the execution of those principles that are sometimes challenging. It really is. It's hard to habitats. Or truthfully, if nutrients are limited, it's on a big reservoir. It is tough to make an impact, and sometimes, most of the time here, we're lucky Mother Nature helps us out. But there's always ways we're looking to improve, especially the habitat, to execute those principles truthfully.
Yeah, and this is, Bailey, right? Common theme, habitat seems to come up every time we have a biologist, doesn't matter where they're from in the country, we get on this habitat subject. And there's no better way for anglers to participate in management than volunteering for these habitat projects. Whether it's Jake asking for more trees or literally human bodies to help put them out. Um,
Yeah.
that's a great place to volunteer.
I wish New York had something like this, or had the ability anyway to put out Christmas trees. I'd be buying more Christmas trees if it meant I could put them in our lakes.
Well, you don't hear Jake or I promoting using them as brush piles just because Jake made the statement like they don't last. You put a Christmas tree brush pile out and you got to replenish those. And Shane Bush in his episode mentioned this as well. Like you have to come back every 3 to 5 years and supplement those trees with new trees because they're just going to degrade. But what Jake's trying to do is he's laser focused on these juvenile fish. And whenever you're doing that, like a single Christmas tree may have hundreds of juvenile fish that use it at one given time. So it could be a big impact, even at a small scale.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head there, and that's not to downplay, brush pile work and everything else, because there is a time and a place, and a lot.
Jake, you were talking a little bit about the recruitment.
Yes,
whenever we do the short term.
Yeah, those short term pulses, and that's what I was getting at again. Not to downplay brush pile type work that's geared more towards concentrating adult fish, improving angler catch rates, because ultimately I also say that my job at its sheer nuts and bolts is to keep anglers happy. And usually that has to do with angler catch rates. So great work there as well. And we're usually pretty lucky in a lot of our lakes around here. We have most of the things we need to concentrate fish. We have the offshore structures. We have a lot of the other larger habitats to concentrate fish, but we have some year class issues. And that's really where like you said, laser focused on that. So I don't care if these Christmas trees break down even after 1 year. If I put them out for 1 year and I get improved year class strength in those areas, that's going to last long term. So the trees might be gone, but that year class strength is going to make an impact on the lake for a decade plus potentially. So I see a lot more benefit in that type of work in our neck of the woods. It's really what I am focused on 100%.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about keeping anglers happy for a second. One of the things, whenever I think about fork, I think about slot limit. It's like the shining example across the country of a slot limit that people tout actually worked.
Yeah,
And I say that with a little bit of reservation, like a question mark.
you should.
Did the slot limit actually work?
And
Wait, Jake, before you answer that, I also think it would be smart to tell them what a slot limit is and what it is on fork specifically. Sorry, go for it.
No, absolutely. So slot limits in general are just as opposed to your traditional solid length limit. Traditionally in bass sense, it's going to be a minimum length limit where, say, 14, 15 inches of fish has to be that length or greater before you can possess it, whether you're harvesting, putting it in your live well for a tournament, whatever. A slot limit has a lower bound and a top bound, and essentially in most situations, freshwater, especially bass oriented, we're saying within this given size, these fish have to go back. So we're allowing harvest of smaller fish and typically harvest of most of the times one very large fish above that slot. So fork specifically, the slot is 16 to 24 inches. So around the state still, we allow 5 fish per day to be possessed. No different on fork. You can have 5 under 16 inches, or you can have 4 under 16 inches and 1 over 24 inches, which truthfully, that could average anywhere 6 to 10 pounds, depending on the size of the fish. We have seen a 13-pound fish under 24 inches. It can happen in the right scenario. But fundamentally, slots they were derived to promote, obviously, potential trophy fisheries, and it's all geared at trying to kind of thin the herd. You want to use them in situations where you have consistent and high reproductive success, where you have a large abundance of smaller fish, and you want to promote the thinning of those smaller fish with the idea of the bass that make it past that and say into the slot, now they have less competition and they're protected to grow to larger sizes. So there's not as many of their brothers and sisters fighting for the same food, the same habitat, they're going to grow even better. And on top of that, they cannot be possessed. That's the traditional sense of a slot limit. You kind of asked as well, or mentioned, that obviously the regulation is phenomenal on fork. What, truthfully, to get down to it, I mention all the time now, harvest is not really a thing in most situations in black bass fisheries anymore. You get, yeah, we get some localized areas where there's a lot more harvest, but as a whole, we just don't see harvest. Most of our lakes, 95+% release of legal fish. Truthfully, probably 98%, if not more. People don't harvest bass. People don't eat bass. Lots of opinions on that one way or the other, but that's the truth regardless. But all the same, on fork, what this slot limit really does, it's still protecting the majority of our quality size fish. 16 inches, 2.5, 3 pounds, but 3 to 8 pound fish as a rough guesstimate of fish that when they're caught, they have to go right back to the lake regardless. Live wells are phenomenal. All of the research that has been done for fish care in live wells is phenomenal, without a doubt. And it helps maintain and increase survival of fish in live wells, without a doubt. But there's no denying fish still have a greater chance of dying when they're handled longer, when they're held in a live well longer, any and all of those things, the stress that is put on them, you're going to see more fish die. So whether we're talking about 1% or 100%, when you're talking about 3 to 8 pound fish, that can make a difference. So when we're pretty much ensuring, and let's not pretend like fish that are just caught in immediate release don't die as well. That happens without a doubt. Fish die, angling pressure that impacts, but we're reducing the number of 3 to 8 pound bass that are likely going to die from angling in that lake. They're going back in. We see more of them survive. More of them are in the lake. I mean, that regulation helps tremendously. And again, fork is everything else that it has. It has the habitat, the water quality, the nutrients, the growing season. I mean, fork has everything you need, but you need a good regulation in place with that on top of everything else.
Jake, again, perfect answer.
I can leave twice.
We should have called this podcast the Habitat and Harvest Podcast, Bailey, because common theme, habitat every single time we have a podcast, harvest every single time we have a podcast. And I had written down in my notes pre-show that the slot limit on fork didn't work, ? Because exactly what you mentioned, Jake, we have a non-consumptive use population now. We don't harvest bass. Mm-hmm. So the part of the slot limit that makes the fishery better, in quotes, would be the harvest of juvenile fish to relieve some pressure so that individuals that remain in the population can grow at a greater rate and hit that safety zone. That part is still the question mark, because that part may or may not be working because we don't have enough participation. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep, absolutely.
The part that does work was unintended. Mm-hmm. It was intended in the fact that it protects these mid-sized fish, and you said it so well, 3 to 8 pound fish. It protects them. That part was always intended. But what we didn't realize is we were actually needing to protect them from the live well.
Yeah. And
the tournament aspect, if fork was available to every tournament organization, traditional 5 fish, 14 inches or bigger, yada yada, I don't know that it would have ever turned into the fishery it did, because we wouldn't have protected those fish in the same way.
It wouldn't have sustained it nearly as long, for sure. That's what's always been so amazing about fork, is how it's held on so long. The reservoir aging, it still seems to spit out fish. And yeah, you couldn't go out there and catch 4 to 5 pound fish all over the lake with a standard regulation, because they just would not exist in the abundance they do, without a doubt.
So how do tournaments function on fork currently? Because there are tournaments that happen there. We saw the Bassmaster Elites there. How do they function?
And honestly, it's not just the elites. I think a lot of folks are surprised. Fork is still a very tournament-heavy lake. It's almost a head-scratcher at times. And, there's years in our creel surveys there when we're doing angler interviews, going out and getting a good picture of how the anglers are utilizing our lakes. And that's how we gauge how much effort, how much money is spent on the lake, fish that are caught, everything else. There's years where over half of the total effort on fork is from tournaments. And we're talking about, obviously, the lake is fleeced almost 365 days a year. It's a lot of effort. We're talking about half of that coming from tournaments. So that regulation has not scared tournament efforts away at all. Most situations, if you don't have the luxury of being able to do a true catch, weigh, immediate release format, they follow the regulation to a T. There are a lot of tournaments where 8 pounds on Lake Fork comes in first place because they brought in 5.5 to 2 pound fish. They didn't catch an over. There are many times of the year where an over isn't caught in that tournament, so everyone is bringing in under 16-inch fish, and that's it. Or you get the one angler that's lucky and he catches an over, and maybe he might not even have a limit of fish, but you catch that one over. So it's a whole different strategy, a whole different animal. But they certainly happen. Everything from weekly working man's evening tournaments to big bass events to what I just call circuit level, say your bass champs, Texas Team Trail, anything else.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Follow the regulation. It's protecting the right size class of fish. I do think that if people would participate in the regulation and take out their 5 unders, that they would quickly see that 8 pounds no longer could win, because you would still catch a limit of fish, but instead of it being 8, it'd be 10 and a half, 11. And then overs would become more abundant because it comes down to the carrying capacity. If you can support 100 individual bass per acre, at 1 pound each, and you reduce that to 80 fish, all of a sudden they're a pound and a quarter.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's that's really cool that you put it this way for the slot. And once again, we're not just talking about tournaments. We're talking just as much of the individual who might put 5 fish in the live well so that they can take social media shots later in the day or whatever. This slot limit protects those fish from entering the live well, which turns out to be a really great thing.
No, absolutely. And that's honestly why I word it as possession when I say it prevents them from possessing the fish, not harvesting, because harvest isn't a thing anymore. I think that mindset should even be on most regulations, that regulation just simply prohibits possession. And whether you take it home and flay it, or you want to put it in your live well for 2 minutes to get a scale out even, or like you mentioned, the 5 fish end of the day shot. I'll stay off that subject. but
True worries, Jake. I'm here to say the things that you can't say.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely right. But all the same, it's possession. It has nothing to do with harvest at this point. But you can possess these or you can't.
Okay, so that's fork. Do you have any other slot limit reservoirs in your district?
Mm-hmm. Athens is one. Lake Athens is a great one. It's a 14 to 21 inch slot, so similar concept, just a little bit smaller size bands on each end.
But okay, do we see it working in a similar way?
Very much similar way as fork, absolutely. Now Athens, truthfully, is a little bit more. It had better vegetation consistently year over year. The vegetation is there, so we get more stable year classes. So I would say it could function in the sense of a traditional slot because we have such high recruitment and high abundance of fish, but we don't because there isn't harvest there either. And no surprise, you could almost guess, and the lake probably, but it has vegetation, it has genetics, it has great water quality. It produces amazing quality bass fishing year over year. It's produced sherelunkers, and so also it has a pretty high tournament following there as well. So again, that regulation really is helping that, and the 5 fish glory shot, everything else. It's protecting those fish from being possessed in any fashion.
Love it. Yeah, Athens is. I'm not going to call it your second best, but it's up there in the district.
Yeah.
What reservoirs did you have this year that produced a sherelunker 13 pounds or greater?
Yeah, so we had one brand new one this year, Lake Tawakoni. Have not seen a lake or a sherelunker from there before. So, which
surprised.
Yeah, and Tawakoni truthfully is one of those. It's not a sleeper lake because it has plenty of pressure as well, but I think it just gets overshadowed from lots of other lakes. But if you look at tournament results from there, I mean, it routinely you're looking at least 20 plus pounds to win most situations. One just went against that grain, but all in all, it's a quality bass lake as well. Richland Chambers, which I was happy to see that one. I every year, we get to help contribute to ranking the top bass lakes in our state, and I've been throwing out Richland Chambers on that list, kind of year over year over year, just because again I know what that lake has, and I think it's missed the mark because it's a massive lake and it has a lot of dead water, and that scares people away. When you're looking at close to 50,000 acres, and a small fraction of that is probably producing quality fish. If you don't know the lake, people are not going to want to fish it, but it has produced quality and trophy sized bass for quite some time as well. And then Lake Tyler is our third one, so it's produced a few now, but it's a nice one close to home, just down the road from here, and that's the second one we've seen in a few years out of Lake Tyler now.
Very cool. So you've got Fork, you've got these three others, you've got Athens. What projects are you doing besides the Fork Habitat Project? Are you doing anything else that we really want to tell the audience about?
Sure. A few other small habitat-oriented projects as well, and these are more your traditional offshore brush pile type work. Plenty of that going around as well. Honestly, Fork is one I focus on a lot. If you want to talk, really, I hate to just sheer away from Fork, but one other component we didn't mention that I think has been a hot topic lately is water hyacinth. I don't know. Do we have time to dive into that at all?
You have all the time
All
in
the
the
time
world.
in the world?
This podcast usually goes an hour and a half, 2 hours.
No.
Bailey has to try to rein me in because I just love talking about fish.
Yeah.
So you want to talk hyacinth? Let's talk hyacinth.
I think it's worth discussing right now too, because it's probably the most challenging subject on Fork, and of course, invasive vegetation, especially all over the South. Lakes are
You're going to have to start at Hyacinth 101.
Hyacinth 101.
Let's talk about what the plant is, what we expect it to do in a reservoir, and then get into what's happening in Fork.
So water hyacinth, for one, it's a floating aquatic vegetation. It floats on the surface and it groups up in large mats, similar to some of our other really aggressive invasive species. It can, in the right situations, double in size in the course of a few weeks. If you expand that out over a month or two, it can go from a few acres to pushing 100 plus acres in the right environment. So again, when it's a giant floating mat and it just continually expands and expands, you can all of a sudden have entire creeks, coves, embayments completely choked off. And not just choked off like, say, duckweed, and it's not a big deal. I'm talking you cannot physically push a boat through it. I've had some homeowners call me with hyacinth issues along their shoreline, and they're like, I'm in a 4-wheel drive, 3/4 ton truck, and my truck is spinning at the ramp. My boat won't go down the ramp because there's hyacinth everywhere. So when it mats up, it is heavy, it is strong, and it chokes off all life underneath when you get giant mats. So, and what makes hyacinth kind of a challenge is it also produces seed all summer, and it spits out seed into the lake. Those seeds can sit there dormant in the sediment anywhere from 1 to 10 plus years before they decide to germinate. So once it's there, it's usually there, and it can be year over year. It can be very different in its abundance. So
I'm trying to think of how to describe it for people who've never seen it. It's got like this spongy ball at the base of the leaf that allows it to stay above the water column a little bit. And then it does have this root mass, but the roots don't ever go to the sediment. They're just there to absorb nutrient. And then it has what most would describe a fairly attractive purple flower on it. So, it would be something that if you had a water garden, you would look at it and you go, this is the perfect water garden plant. It just floats out in the middle of the koi pond. It's got a pretty flower, which is one of the main ways that it's being transplanted across this country is, the water garden trade. But whenever it hits a reservoir and it does start to spread, like Jake has mentioned, it will really choke out entire sections of a reservoir, causing aquatic vegetation to disperse. It will decrease the dissolved oxygen of the water column, which means fish will not want to be around it. You have to have sunlight to allow phytoplankton to produce oxygen for your water, or you have to have a disturbance at the surface level to allow atmospheric oxygen to enter the water. And hyacinth stops both of those things from happening. So you get lower dissolved oxygen, that's going to push fish away. You also, because of its ability to cloud the water column, it changes the bacterial community in the bottom of the lake. So you get a higher thermocline, you get lower dissolved oxygen at the sediment. That changes the bacteria. They become anaerobic. They start producing more ammonia. That drives the nitrogen cycle. It becomes this really environmental headache when the hyacinths are there. So on Fork, if you can tell us, like, when was hyacinth first introduced at Fork, and then what are the current impacts we have?
Yeah, absolutely. And Fork has honestly had hyacinth. I'm not going to tell you the exact year, but it's been decades. And if I'd have to go back and double check, but I believe even into the 90s there was, hyacinth was in Fork. So that's one thing a lot of people don't realize,
Okay.
that it's been around for a long time, and there has been all kinds of management efforts to, truthfully, historically eradicate it over time. And I think ultimately that word is part of what becomes maybe a controversial topic, that I've kind of taken a completely different approach with hyacinth on Fork right now. I mentioned the seeds. I mentioned that they can last in the sediment for 1 to 10 years and then come back. With that said, we've seen it firsthand. Eradication isn't a possibility after it's really established in Fork, and obviously, when it's been there for decades, you will not get rid of it. You just there's simply no way. We saw that drawdown in 21 and 22. All vegetation, including hyacinth, left the lake. There was none. When the lake filled up in 22, I was already seeing hyacinth popping up in probably March. It comes back, so we won't get rid of it. Right now, there is, honestly, in parts of the lake, there is a lot of hyacinth, without a doubt. So since the drawdown, I kind of said, let's not, herbicide. You mentioned herbicide earlier. Let's not spray anything for a few years. I want to see what comes back in the lake after the drawdown, knowing that we talked about oxygenating the soil, all the terrestrial vegetation that was there. Let's just see what happens. Let's not give any second guesses to how the lake would have recovered. Let's just hold off on spraying. And I've kind of kept my foot on that pedal up until just very recently. Again, this year we've seen hyacinth come back enough. The top end of a few of our creeks, for those that are familiar with Fork, Little Caney, Birch Creek, and the top end of Running, we have areas that are 100+ acre mats, solid hyacinth choking it off. But even in those areas, what my plan, and working with John Fendiason and his crew now, are that kind of manage our statewide herbicide and vegetation management, is let's try and just keep it in check. I'm using the word a haircut now. Let's give hyacinth a haircut. Let's prevent it from being a biological issue or an access issue. But let's not go in there and just spray to get rid of it all, because we won't. And when we do that, even, yes, all herbicides are selective. Everything is geared for, you can kind of just target some species, but you're going to have some collateral damage regardless. And in small amounts, hyacinth can also be habitat. I mean, let's picture a 20-foot by 20-foot area. That's just a floating dock with shade underneath. And truthfully, if you've ever pulled up hyacinth at all, there is all kinds of life in small amounts under it. Crawfish absolutely love being up in hyacinth roots. There's forage there. It's covered. When we did that backpack shocking the other day, some of our best sites were, there was maybe a 6-foot swath of hyacinth, and we were just walking along the edge of it, and young of the year bass were hiding under it like crazy. So will that continue to expand? It absolutely will in some cases, but we luckily have the resources to manage vegetation. And that's what I always say. We don't need to just go in and want to eradicate, but let's manage vegetation as we should. So give it a haircut, prevent it from causing true biological issues. And if it's held in check otherwise, if it's just a swath down the bank, that's better than nothing there. Because in some of those areas, you would have no vegetation instead. I would rather have hyacinth there. And I've said this. There's a gamble with this. It it may in a few years really explode even more. That is yet to be seen. But it is a calculated decision that I'm honestly comfortable with on a lake like Fork.
Yeah, and I promise I'll say it so that Jake doesn't have to. The research that's done on some of these plants are done in environments with optimal condition for their growth. So if we look at hyacinth, and you might read that hyacinth can double in abundance or size of the mat within a week. Well, those are done in effluent ponds that have high nutrient loads, optimal growth for research. And they're saying at best, this is what it can do.
Mm-hmm.
On Lake Fork, a hyacinth mat that's 100 acres is not going to be 200 acres next week.
No,
That's just the reality. It's not. And like you said, like a 20 by 20, that's the perfect example. If you have a 20 by 20 mat, that's a large dock, and we all love to flip and pitch something around a dock.
mm-hmm.
That's great for bass fishermen. It becomes an issue when it takes up too much of an area. A couple of questions I wrote down. Are you seeing other plants competing against the hyacinth? You mentioned hydrilla on a rebound at Fork. So are you seeing that there is the ability of some other plants to compete for that same space and kind of keep the hyacinth at check?
Yes, in some situations, and it's very variable depending on the parts of the lake. I think last year it probably did a better job. Alligator weed, another non-native species, but all the same, alligator weed was functionally mixed 50-50, if not more, in a lot of these areas, and it was also keeping the hyacinth almost locked in, so it wasn't moving around as much. This year, the hyacinth has won in several of those locations, but there's other species, places that have lots of buttonbush or things like that. It's great at keeping it locked in behind that, and that kind of just goes back to the same mentality of why, if it's in those areas, if it's locked in, especially, why do anything with it? There's just not a strong reason to. But does it outcompete in some places? I mean, it can, obviously, and it will, but I think you have to also look at it year over year and manage it that year with what's given you. We never know when we hit another drought and everything goes away, including the hyacinth. We never know when we get another 2021 snowmageddon and we're crazy hard freezing temperatures for a week plus. That's going to really hammer the species back as well. So I don't want to manage now for what could happen over the next 5 years. I don't want to go in and try and get rid of it because it could be bad over the next 5 years. When we really don't know, every year needs to be looked at it a little differently.
That's such a great perspective. What about? Maybe I know too much about you. What about the Arkansas cages? Are y'all using Arkansas cages to stock plants?
Yep. So we have some on Fork right now as well. They've been out a couple of years. The Lake Fork Sportsmen's Association kind of led the charge in building those with some local high school groups. So we have 10 locations with some of the Arkansas cages and coontail in them as well right now. To be honest, it's a good thing, but with the drawdown and the rebound of Fork, we've seen coontail pop up around a lot of the lake. So, I mean, there's places where there's cages where there's coontail right now, but there's plenty of places without cages that there's coontail as well. So it's tough to tell, but again, talking about the unknowns and potential drought, having those cages there, we're going to continue to refill them and keep them there just because you don't know when the lake goes through a drought again and we start to lose habitat, and keeping any sources on the lake is, at least, if nothing else, going to help it rebound faster, maybe help it maintain in those areas. So I'm a big believer in them. I love the concept. And Truthfully, I could see us expanding it more in some areas. I think actually we may look at something with that with the Christmas tree project in conjunction that you and I have talked about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if anybody's wondering what an Arkansas cage is, get more in depth by going to the Jeremy Reesley episode. But the state of Arkansas created a aquatic plant cage that floats that you stock with cedar plants. So most commonly is coontail, but some people are using eelgrass. I could see it working well with milfoil, or even, I'll say it so Jake doesn't have to, hydrilla would be great in a cage. something that would protect that core plant from predators, and it floats out in a, you strategically put it in a cove, and over time, either depending on reproductive methods, but either through fragments, buds, seeds, something disperses that plant into that general area and allows cedar populations to pop up. And you just hope to overwhelm the predators, and predators are like turtles. Of course, there's some small mammals and common carp. Anything that's going to mess with the benthic environment could be consuming those plants. So it's really cool to see you using the Arkansas cage and bringing that to Texas as well, Jake.
No, definitely. Like I said, there's lots of good benefits to it. I really do think coontail is probably the best species for it. You mentioned hydrilla. I've said often I'm surprised hydrilla hasn't shown up in those cages yet. Um, Truthfully, I'm surprised we don't have some anglers that have kept them filled up with it. But all the same, it would probably do well also.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe somebody's listening to this and is going to try it.
GPS coordinates incoming, folks.
Yeah. If you haven't noticed, Jake is a fan of all aquatic plants, all habitat. He's a bass fisherman's biologist, man. This is why I love having you on.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I'll reiterate that. All vegetation can be good. All vegetation can be bad. And I mentioned the word manage it as well. We should manage vegetation. We shouldn't manage a species. We should manage vegetation. We know the benefits that any cover is better than none. If we know some species are going to do better than others, we shouldn't try to get rid of them if the end game is then we have no cover. And I've seen plenty of situations where native vegetation can be problematic all the same. So some have, there's just different situations. Coontail has a very similar growth form to hydrilla in a lot of situations. Eelgrass even. In a lot of our lakes, it'll grow out to 8 to 10 feet of water. For homeowners, they don't care what it is. It can choke off shorelines, their boat docks, everything all the same. So it's vegetation in my book. Some of it, yes, isn't native, but guess what? A lot of what's swimming in our lakes as well didn't originate there. The reservoirs themselves maybe weren't. And I don't want to come off too radical, but that's my truth perspective on it. And we should just manage all vegetation.
Love it. Bailey loves it.
Hey.
Yeah, we could use some more vegetation up here.
Yeah, I'll overnight it to you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Careful with that H word. Doesn't like that one.
Yeah. All right. There's one more topic I think we have to cover. We had you on, I'm going to say it was a year ago, to talk about the telemetry study that you, Todd Driscoll, did. And I think it would be great. Black Bass 2025 is coming up, and Jake is giving 2 presentations on Tuesday. I think that's August 12th. That have kind of came from that research, that telemetry research. So if you will, Jake, give me the highlights, the summary of both the presentations you plan to give at Black Bass 2025.
Sure. So both of those, honestly, it came from one project, and I kind of hinted at earlier with publications and our work in general. I never put together projects at all with the idea of I'm doing this to publish. Those are just added benefits out of it. So in this case, as the project played out and the data came in, we saw the opportunity to split it out and actually have 2 full-blown research studies and publications come out of it. So we kind of split it into traditional telemetry work at first, the types that's kind of been looked at before, looking at bass movement throughout the year, bass habitats that they've used, things of that nature. And then the second one was the really kind of cool and unique component, looking at more the behavioral side. So I almost call it habitat and movement based and behavior. And that looking at how bass respond to boat noise and to angling itself. And that was a really fun one. And all of this came from anglers kind of talking about both Lake Fork and Toledo Bend, kind of following that drought timeline when they were just seeing some struggling fishing success trip over trip. But honestly, our data wasn't really supporting that. And so we wanted to go out and get answers to our anglers of what are these bass doing over the year. And on the habitat or on the behavior side, have they learned to avoid boat noise? Have they learned, does angling itself, does splashing of a lure, the sounds of a lure moving through the water, a lure coming by them. Have they evolved? Are they biologically programmed, whatever, enough to avoid that? Is that why fishing successes struggled? So the first presentation is going to look at how much do our bass move, an individual fish, how much is it moving over the course of a year, over the course of a week, and is it relating to typical habitat and structures that anglers associate bass relating to? So are they still utilizing points, creek channels, drop-offs, humps? We looked at roadbeds and bridges and all types of other things that everyone in the angling mind say these are where the bass are at. Are they using those, or have they in fact, are they going out to no man's land more? Are fish moving more to areas that are less frequently pressured? And some of the cool parts about that, the highlights, I think the home ranges was such an eye opener that we saw overall. Let's just both lakes combined, let's say about 100 acres. I mean, on average, a home range for a fish. So we're talking about throughout the year, what's the core area that this bass inhabits? And we're looking at about 100 acres. So we did not see the mass migrations of fish that all move into the spawning pockets in the spring, then all move offshore following whatever navigation channels people want to call them, and then move out to offshore humps, points, creek channels, ledges, roadbeds. We didn't see that. And we didn't see it, the fall migration in the backs of the spawning pockets chasing shad. We didn't see that either. Were there shad moving back there? Yes. And were there bass with them? Yes. But those fish were already there. So that was a really cool part about the habitat and movement one. Then the behavior one, I think the big highlight of that was how often bass react to boat noise. Big picture on that, 60% of all the bass that we were tracking, when we approached them, were reacting, alerted to our presence long before we ever put a trolling motor in the water. And I drive that one home. That's, I think, a big one to our anglers. So think about that. There's, the course numbers here. It's not saying in all lakes this is how it works, and you're only fishing for 40% of the bass. But in some ways, think about that 60% of the population of the fish we were tracking, at least, they were alerted to our presence before we would have ever dropped a trolling motor down, because that was, of course, the second step. We would, if they didn't move, we got to put the trolling motor down and actually make five casts of them to see how they reacted to lures. But it was really the boat noise to begin with that a lot of fish knew that we were there before we would ever even be fishing for them. So confirms a lot of what people have always thought. You need to be quiet, need to be stealthy, but to actually have the data in tracking fish, to be able to know right where they're at and to pull up on them and to see it happen in real time was, I think, really interesting.
More than interesting. I have a copy of the paper for the habitat use, the telemetry use. I have a copy of that paper, and I have read it 12, 15 times. And I pull little things, you know me, I'm always tinkering with habitat and where do we deploy it and how do we deploy it and all those things. And I've been using your paper more and more. It seems to be creeping into my daily work more and more whenever we're designing a private lake or we're trying to put together sampling protocols or habitat. I'm using it. Mm-hmm. So it's more than cool because it's applicable. Yep. The angling side of it, I think that Bailey can attest to this. Kayak fishing has only become more and more popular. And with kayaks, you are stealthy, you are quiet. That is part of the experience, is to move into areas without alerting everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that, I'm sure there would be a good advantage there. And truthfully, and that's just me thinking out loud now. It would be fun at some point. I don't know how I justify this study, but to look at a comparison, approaching bass with traditional bass boat, sonars pinging, outboard motors running, whatever, and also with a kayak, and just see if are there actual differences there. There probably is for those reasons you're mentioning, but that would be kind of cool to look at.
Well, if you ever need a kayak guy, I'd be happy to come down to Texas and help you.
Yeah, just come on down for it. That's 2 years straight. Let's hammer it out.
Yeah. I guess it wouldn't be such a pain. Twist my arm.
Yeah,
it'd be so bad to come down to Texas and fish.
Yeah, it's not a bad place to be.
Convince my wife that I'm there tomorrow.
Well, you are coming in August. to Black Bass 2025. And if you want to hear more about these studies, I think that's a first step. Black Bass 2025 in San Antonio, August 10th through 14th. Guys like Jake, biologists from across this country, are going to come and they're going to talk about their research. And it's going to be hard because me and you were discussing, Jake, the schedule. Like you give one presentation, you have a 15-minute break, and you give the other presentation, and that's in one room. There are 3 additional rooms, so 4 total happening at the same time. So how is Bailey going to be in 4 places at once is the question. How are you going to be able to digest everything that's being said across all the talks at one time?
I have to bring a bunch of cameras.
Yeah. We'll have serious angler cameras in every room to where we can just record them all. That's not a bad idea.
We'll strap a mic on each podium or wherever the person's talking so we can cover it all.
That's not a bad idea. I was doing a podcast yesterday, somebody else's show for the Fisheries podcast, and we were talking about Black Bass 2025, and the host was like, "Tell me about the previous 2," and I was like, "Well, the first one I wasn't born for.
Yeah.
The second one I was in high school for, and so we have this one." And in 25 years, we're talking 2050, I'll be retired. So the only one I can talk about is this one. And it hasn't happened yet. I'm super excited to be there. But this is, you really get 1 or 2, depending on how your career falls out, black bass summits that you get to attend.
Yeah,
this is our one.
No, it's really cool. I've thought about that several times as well. It's like, man, 1975, this is the 3rd one ever. The first one was in 75. That kind of puts it in perspective of how infrequent they happen, but with that, how much changes over 25 years? I mean, a ton. So it's not just going to be the repetitive. What they were talking about in the 75 one is way different than the 2000, and obviously way different than what we're talking about now. So it really is a cool opportunity to get that fall in the window.
I haven't done it yet, but I should pull the AFS name book from 75 and look at how many black bass species there were. I'm going to guess 6 or 7. And then in 2000, there would have been 9. And now, what number are we at? We're at 15, maybe?
Yeah. I would almost argue too many, but that's just my personal.
Well, definitely. But I mean, whenever you're saying like, hey, the technology, everything is changing. Yes, in 1975 they were managing 6 species, and now you have 10 additional species basically that you're trying to wrap your brain around.
No, absolutely.
But they all came from the original same fish, and so that part is very complicated.
No, it is, but it just for all those reasons, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be fun to be part of. I think it's cool that there will be a few folks, some of the people on the committee spearheading that were actually involved with the 2001 as well. And you don't get that opportunity very often to have people, let's say institutional knowledge. I love that phrase that have been around and seen, plan 2 of these now.
Yeah, and Jake, you and I, we have the opportunity, if we want to stick it out, to be at the 2050 meeting, but we'll be in that same situation where we have the institutional knowledge, and we'll be like the 2 old men going, back in our day, that's not how we did this.
Yeah, y'all are crazy now for sure. No, I think Driscoll, I think Todd maybe followed the right path. He's up on the St. Lawrence every summer now. He's got to play. He retired about the perfect time, and he gets to spend every summer on the St. Lawrence fishing.
So for those of you that don't know, Todd Driscoll was he was more south part of East Texas, Toledo Bend, Sam Rayburn, biologist there, but also was what I guess we would consider like the black bass coordinator. His emphasis was black bass, and now Jake, you've taken that a title officially, right?
Correct.
What do y'all call it?
Black bass statewide coordinator. I think actually, largemouth bass. Not in this situation, it's just largemouth bass, but
very nice. Okay, so largemouth bass statewide coordinator, and that in Texas you get that title and still district supervisor and no additional pay. It's just double the work, right?
Yeah. It's got some benefits, I suppose.
Yeah, there you go.
It's luckily I love bass, so I'm not going to complain too much.
But Todd was doing it right. So through through his entire career, fished tournaments. I don't know that he ever fished in his district, but he fished tournaments,
Mhm.
and then would spend a long time up north, and that just became longer and longer every single year until he finally decided it's time to retire and give this fishing thing full time.
Yeah, no, I was good on him. So that's if I'm still here for the next symposium, it'll be as a guest, not as a
There you go.
professional.
There you go. No, I hope you're still presenting research. You do such a great job. Um, we are very grateful that you joined us this week because every time you bring all the information. Yes, yes. What an excellent episode. Do we have anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure we mention?
I'm sure I'm forgetting something. I mean, I'll be honest, but I think
Sure.
we covered the big ones. So
This means we got to get
Um,
you back on soon.
yeah, oh, absolutely.
Well, and I guess I want to give you a shout out. You've hired some additional biologists and technicians, and you've got one of the larger teams in the state. And I know one of your biologists, TJ Pullian, he is also going to present at Black Bass 2025.
Mhm.
Do you happen to know what he's presenting on?
It's going to be actually from some of his master's work. So over on what reservoir is that? Neely Henry.
Well,
But
it's
somebody. So
Coosa River
yep.
stuff.
So the tournament bass related work over there that Auburn University did.
Yeah, so TJ's presentation should cover something that I think is going to be very important, which is during electrofishing, the managers catch different age class and genetic class of fish than anglers bring to tournament weigh-ins. They were seeing that tournament anglers bring younger, faster growing fish
Which is crazy.
than we catch on average in electrofishing. Which, if that trend holds true across other reservoirs, Fork included, that could be very important because I think a lot about, are we serving up the right product
Absolutely.
to anglers as biologists? Are we producing the right product? And we always talk about managing populations, and we talked today about habitat and cycles and all these things. But if an angler is actually bringing 5 fish to the weigh-in that are faster growing younger fish, especially compared to what we're sampling, they are literally bringing a different product to that weigh-in.
Absolutely.
And I think this Auburn research, I can't wait to hear it out of TJ's mouth so that I can digest it. I've read it, but I can't wait to hear it and then ask him questions. And once again, just another great opportunity. I don't know how Bailey's going to handle this meeting and all the content that could come from it.
We're gonna leave with a year's worth. That's for dang sure.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
Jake, thank you, brother. I know you got to get back in the field, but we appreciate you so much for coming on the show this week. And if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do so?
Email honestly is the best way. By and large, jake.norman at tpwd.texas, that's spelled out, .gov, Gov as in Victor. Email is the easiest. Office phone is sketchy, and just shoot me an email and say you want to talk more, and I can always give a phone call out then.
And then the district has some social media. You guys have like a district Facebook page?
We do. I'll be honest, it's not as impressive as it could be. Right or wrong, none of us are social media hardcore right now. So we do have a district Facebook page. You can get some information on it. We don't use it as well as maybe we should.
Okay, so email Jake Norman. Bailey, do you have anything last second for Jake?
No, I guess just because I know there's maybe some folks when we're talking Lake Fork, especially, that are probably curious and have some questions. So we've been talking about specifically in the 3 to 8 pound class earlier, and then talking about that upper echelon. If you even have the data, where do you think more of those 10+ pound fish are being caught out of? Are they out in the timber? Are some shallow? Is there a common trend to where those bigger 10+ pound class fish are being caught?
Man, that's a great question, and honestly, probably no surprise. It varies so much seasonally. Our most recent big bass event that was held there in early June, the winning fish, and it was a double-digit fish, I believe, came out of shallow water on, I think, a chatterbait, to be honest. So I mean, there was nothing fancy other than they were in the right place, the right time, the right habitat, and that changes so much on that lake every year. The years are like right now, and we've got a lot of shallow vegetation. Fish held around shallow a lot longer after the spawn than some of those years when we just had clay bank and standing timber. It was like a mass exodus all at once when the water temps
Mm.
got above 75 or 80. So it changes seasonally a lot. Just for me, I always say, talking about big fish, I always tell folks March and June are my two favorite months on that lake. And really, you could put just that whole window, March through June. But March, you still get a lot of big fat pre-spawn fish. There's lots of fish spawning, but you can catch them up shallow, getting ready to spawn in more traditional methods. And then by June, that's really when I think the offshore bite really, most years, really gets consistent. It happens a lot earlier than that, but weather, you don't know every year. Our weather is so crazy here. June's pretty stable every year. Those 2 months are fabulous. So if you really like chasing them offshore, June and July are hard to beat. If you like going up after pre-spawn fish, more shallower depths, March is phenomenal. And this year, truthfully, it was kind of lake wide. There wasn't even really parts of the lake, and I attribute that to better habitat around the lake right now. It was really cool. After the elite event there, I looked at the data of all the fish catches, and a lot of years when I look at that, there's parts of the lake that are fishing better, and it's obvious. It was a shotgun blast, almost equally patterned around 85% of the lake, besides the very, very far upper ends that are practically swamps now. I mean, they were catching them everywhere then. So, not a lot of help on that answer, but it's the truth.
No, I mean that's cool. That just means regardless of where you go there, I mean, it's what people say. It's kind of cliche, but you always got a shot at a big one.
Yeah, I know you do. It's a special place.
Heck yeah. Yeah, dude, for real. Thank you for your time. Always been banger shows every time you come on here, and
Appreciate it.
already looking forward to the next one, man.
Absolutely. It sounds like you'll be in San Antonio in August too, so we'll see you there.
Yes, sir. All right, folks, that is going to wrap it up with Mr. Jake Norman. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that conversation. A lot to unpack, but some cool stuff. And I liked how, at least from my point of view, Steve, how he was able to translate a lot of things in regards to the angler, not just talking about the fishery and the biological makeup of it, but like how that all correlates to when it comes down to putting the boat in the water and going fishing. And I think that was a really cool aspect that he brought to the table. And I think for all the Lake Fork folks, I would be big Jake Norman fans, especially if I was from Texas.
Yeah, I mean, you should be. And Jake is, we've talked about this in his past episodes that he did on Serious Angler, but this is his dream job. He wanted to come to Texas to manage Lake Fork. He's a bass fisherman, tournament fisherman, loves this, and you can tell. You can tell because everything he does scientifically, he relates back to what would we do as an angler, and he lives it and breathes it, and you can just tell.
Yeah, he wants those upper echelon fish to be more in abundance being caught. Where it's like he's like, yeah, 8-pounders, like it's a lot of fun, whatever.
Yeah,
Where me, I'm
that's
like,
exactly right.
I'm great, very happy with an 8-pounder. Where it's like, no, I want these 10 plus, I want 13 plus.
But for a fishery like Fork, that's who you need. That's the
Yeah,
kind of biologist that you need.
yeah,
Is the biologist that says Lake Fork is a great fishery, and we have to do everything we can to keep it at this level or better. Because if you were a biologist that wasn't laser focused on that, Lake Fork would still be wonderful. But knowing that that's who is leading the charge gives me confidence to not question, to want to help, to want to participate. Like this is the personality we needed.
yep, he's exactly it. You're
Yep.
like, that's just 9-pounder is not good enough. Let's keep going.
Not good enough. Keep
That's how you
going.
build
Yep.
a potential world record, or at least you try to anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean the
Mentality.
world record. Woof, that's a whole different subject. But state record, maybe state record.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yep.
State record is from Fork, and from some of the things Jake was telling us, they're making all the right steps to potentially have that happen. We might move back into a record chase.
Hopefully.
That'd be fun.
Man, great episode. Should we get into Lake Hotline?
Yes, please. Let's do it. We've got a question this week.
We do, and it's from Charles Reek on Instagram. asked us, can you discuss the stress the bass may feel and if it has any effect on their mortality rates?
Okay, Charles, this is a well-researched subject. It is not my area expertise. Like, I'm not doing any of the research on it. But of course, we read up on these things. And one of the primary indicators of live well stress is blood cortisol. And there are researchers, specifically northern parts of the US and Canada, thinking of people like Stephen Cook, who have devoted their career to understanding out of water time, like how much atmosphere that fish is exposed to, also live well time, and then post release, how that changes the stress. So, of course, the longer a fish is held out of the water, and I guess it really starts before that. From the time the fish is hooked, the fight, the retrieval of that fish, the depth that fish comes from, the distance it comes from, and how much it's having to fight. That's going to initially start the blood cortisol increase. And then out of water time will continue to cause that increase. The second it goes back in the water, we'll see a decrease, but that decrease is not exponential. It's slow and it's gradual. So that recovery time is determined by the effort the fish puts in during the retrieval and that out of water time. We would like to think of the live well as a pure environment that continues to decrease that cortisol, and that's not necessarily true. I don't have any hard facts, stats to tell you like it's this many minutes or it's this, but we do know that water temperature, salinity, there's a couple of things that will decrease that stress production, stress hormone production, but it takes time. And then you have the live well is not a stable environment. So you have, as additional fish are introduced, you have their stress that could continue to cause stress on the other fish. You also have, as you're traveling across the lake or across the reservoir for a weigh-in, you have that travel time. And in that travel time, you're not bringing fresh water in. So you're recirculating. You also have that water moving. So that's another stressful event. So then we had the initial catch. We started to decrease the stress hormones. Then we travel to a weigh-in, or we travel from spot to spot. And so we get spikes. And they're still measurable after release, measurable stress hormones or blood cortisol for days afterwards as it's still declining. So all these things are cumulative. Of course, the more stress the fish is put under, the more chance that it has that might be some sort of post-release injury, we'll call it, whether it's mortality or whether it's bacterial infection or loss of ability to forage efficiently. And these things, like I say, researchers like Stephen Cook that look at fish constantly and how are we impacting them, well researched. We know that there are things that we can do. So always bring a fish in as efficiently as you can. Don't play it out to complete exhaustion. When you do that, complete exhaustion, that means that fish is going to have a longer recovery time with higher blood cortisol. Minimize your out of water time. So if you can, always wet your hands before you bring the fish out of water. Minimize that time. And when I say minimize that time, somewhere between 30 seconds to 1 minute, and get it back in the water. As you start to increase from 2 minutes beyond 5 minutes, then we start really having a lot of issue. If you can immediately release that fish, that's best. If you have to put it in the live well should be 5 to 10 degrees below the surface temperature at that morning. So whatever it was that morning, 5 to 10 degrees below that. You should always be adding in new water. There should be a slightly higher salinity in your water to produce more slime on your fish. Those are things that you can do to minimize the stress in that live well environment. Of course, as you're traveling across back to weigh in or from spot to spot, treat the fish as if they're precious cargo, as if it was like a 3-year-old baby in that live well. Start and stop a lot slower than you may want to. Don't just smash on every single wave. Like, do it in a way that minimizes the disruption in the live well. And then the last thing is at the weigh-in. We bring the weigh-in, or we bring the boat to the weigh-in, we put those fish in a bag. We need to get them through that line as quick as possible. The bag is a pretty dangerous place to be. You want to either have a perforated bag if we have tanks that are lake water that are aerated, you want a perforated bag. If you don't have a perforated bag, or that's not lake water, that's city water, then what you want to do is you want to put as much water as possible in your bag. You want to get into that weigh-in line. You want to take any bubbler that you can and pop it into your bag so you can keep that water moving and oxygen added to it. And you want to get through that weigh-in line as quick as possible. So those are the tips. But yeah, you want to reduce stress, and that will potentially reduce mortality.
Love it. Hopefully people can take some notes from there. Yeah, great lake hotline.
Question.
Keep the questions coming, folks. Again, you guys can always email us or DM the Serious Angler on social, or DM Steve, and we'll have some questions for future shows. But man, great show with Jake. Appreciate all his time, and definitely not the last time he's going to be on this show. And hopefully, we'll have some more content coming from him from the black bass deal over in August.
Yep, look forward to seeing everybody at Black Bass 2025, including you, Bailey. I'm so excited you're coming to Texas in August. You'll get to experience that true 105 degree afternoon temperature.
Oh,
it's going to be wonderful.
Woo! Can't wait.
Yes, that's something to look forward to. Well, it'll be nice and cool inside. You'll see we run the air conditioner here in Texas. We're going to make sure everybody's having a good time. If you want to know more about the Black Bass Summit, look at my social media. Look at Bailey's social media. We're going to be posting things. I'm going to start posting snippets of the schedule. I'm also going to do some sponsor shout outs and thank yous, so you can see who's supporting this event, who's going to be there. It's going to be really cool.
Heck yeah. Love it, man. Great show. Appreciate you as always, and appreciate you for tuning into this. You guys are awesome. We'll see y'all on the next one.